Maybe there's plenty out of the ordinary been happening, she said darkly. But it hasn't anything to do with that murder. How do you know that? I know it all right. Annie, I said desperately. You can tell me this at least. Has it anything to do with Peggy at the Lancasters? But her astonishment was so evident that I hastened to add. Or with any of the maids there? All of which was most unfortunate, for she froze immediately and departed for the pantry with her head in the air. It was after 9 when I went to the Lancasters to ask Margaret what I was to do with the glove. Mother was asleep, and I slipped out without saying anything. I had not told George about the glove, but it was one of those cool mornings in August which with us sometimes turn into downright cold, and I could not run the risk of our furnace being lighted. That meant water in the radiator pans and discovery. Cool as the wind was, however, the sun had come out and everything looked fresh and green after the night's rain. Even the Lancaster house, white and immaculate, looked cheerful, and the only strange note was the officer on guard in front of it, and a cameraman on the common, trying to find some spot where the trees did not hide it completely, for a picture. I met Mrs. Talbot at the walk, and I was shocked to see that she looked almost ravaged. For all her eccentricity she was in the main a cheerful woman, but even her voice had lost its vigor. "I'm taking over some beef tea," she said. "Mr. Lancaster is ill." We went in together, or rather I went in. She merely gave the jar of beef tea to Jenny and went away. Jenny admitted me without speech, and I saw a group of men in the library, to the left of the front door, as I entered the hall. "I want to see Miss Margaret." "She's in the morning room, miss." Margaret was there, fully and as usual carefully dressed, except that now she wore deep black. She did not hear me at first. She was sitting in front of her desk and staring at the wall above it, without moving. For the first time it occurred to me that morning that Margaret Lancaster was a handsome woman. I had known her so long that I dare say I had never considered her before. She had been like any familiar thing which, after years of familiarity, one does not see at all until some shock or change forces it on one's attention. Looking back as now I can, I realize that to a woman like Margaret Lancaster, good-looking, intelligent and restless, those years in that house must have been nothing less than a long martyrdom. She had never given up, as had Emily. She still dressed beautifully, and had her hair marshalled. I can remember that there was an almost fresh wave in it that morning and that her hands, spread out before her on the desk, were well kept and carefully manicured. But she was also thoroughly poised. When at last she realized that it was I who had entered the room, she turned quietly and looked at me. "Close the door, Louisa. I want to talk to you." When I came back, she indicated a chair close by her, and she lowered her voice. "What did you do with it?" I told her, and she nodded. "That ought to do, for a day or two. Later it will have to be burned, of course." "I want you to burn it without opening the envelope, Louisa." "It opened itself." "Then you know what is in it?" She sat erect and stared at me, and two deep spots of color came into her cheeks. I explained, and she listened. But the explanation was plainly less important to her than the fact that I knew and had seen the glove. There was a long silence when I had finished. Then she made up her mind and, turning to me, put a hand on my knee. "First of all," she said, "I wanted that glove out of the house because it was Jim Wellington's. I give you my word that that is true. And I give you my word that I found it here in the house, after he had gone. But I don't believe for a minute that he killed Mother. But he left the pair here 2 or 3 months ago, in the spring, and I dropped them into a table drawer in the hall. I always meant to tell him they were here, but I forgot. And I'm pretty sure he had no idea himself where he lost them. I had to get rid of that one last night, that's all." It was my turn to sit silent for a time. "Then anybody in the house might have known it was there?" I said finally. She made a gesture.